What if I told you that right now, somewhere in the world, there's a guy who's been running for 72 hours straight, and stopping means certain death? Meet Marcus Chen, 26, former college dropout. 3 months ago he was delivering pizzas and complaining about his student loans. Today, he's about to pull off the most impossible survival story you've ever heard. A story so insane that Hollywood rejected it for being too unbelievable. It started with a wrong turn. Marcus was driving through the Colorado mountains, trying to deliver one last pizza before his shift ended. GPS failed. Phone died. Then the snowstorm hit. What should have been a 20-minute drive turned into the fight of his life. The crash happened at 11:47 p.m. Marcus's beat-up Honda slid off the mountain road, tumbling down a 200-foot embankment. When he came to, blood was streaming down his face. His leg was pinned under twisted metal, and the temperature was dropping fast. 20 below zero. No cell service. No one knew where he was. But here's the thing about Marcus. He'd been a quitter his whole life. Dropped out of college after 1 semester. Quit 3 jobs in 2 years. Never finished anything he started. His ex-girlfriend used to joke that his middle name should be incomplete. But sometimes, when death is staring you in the face, you discover who you really are. The first night was pure hell. Marcus had to make an impossible choice. Stay in the car and freeze to death, or risk hypothermia by going outside to find help. The smart choice was to wait for rescue. The safe choice was to conserve energy. Marcus chose to fight, using his pizza delivery bag as insulation and his phone's dying flashlight. He started walking through knee-deep snow with a broken leg. Every step was agony. Every breath felt like swallowing razor blades. But Marcus kept moving. Hour 6. Marcus was hallucinating. The cold was playing tricks on his mind. He saw his ex-girlfriend telling him he'd never amount to anything. His father's disappointed face when he dropped out of college. Every person who'd ever called him a failure. Every boss who'd fired him. Every teacher who'd said he wouldn't make it. But something weird happened. Instead of giving up, Marcus got angry. Really angry. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running away from something. He was running toward survival. By sunrise, he'd walked 12 miles through a blizzard. 12 miles, with a broken leg, through terrain that would challenge experienced hikers. The park rangers later said it was physically impossible, but Marcus didn't know that. He was too busy refusing to die. Day 2 brought new problems. The storm had covered his tracks, making rescue nearly impossible. Marcus was burning through his energy reserves, and his body was starting to shut down. His lips were blue. His fingers were numb. He couldn't feel his toes. Frostbite was setting in. That's when he found the abandoned cabin, half buried in snow, windows boarded up, but it was shelter. Inside he discovered something incredible the previous owner had left behind. Survival supplies, canned food, emergency blankets, a hand-crank radio, medical supplies. It was like finding treasure in hell. But the radio brought bad news. The storm was getting worse. Search operations were suspended. Marcus was officially on his own. Most people would have given up, waited for the storm to pass, hoped for rescue. Marcus decided to rescue himself. Using materials from the cabin, he built makeshift snowshoes from chair legs and rope, fashioned a splint for his leg from wooden boards, created a signal fire that could be seen for miles. But the most incredible thing, he started walking again. Not away from the mountains, but deeper into them, toward a ranger station he'd heard about on the radio. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of walking through the most brutal terrain imaginable. Marcus fell through frozen streams twice, nearly drowning both times. Fought off hypothermia by doing jumping jacks in sub-zero temperatures. Survived 2 avalanches by diving behind boulders. At one point he was so exhausted he lay down in the snow, ready to give up. But then he remembered something his grandmother used to say before she died. Champions aren't made when they're winning, they're made when they're losing and choose to keep fighting anyway. Marcus got up. He kept walking. On day 6, barely conscious, frostbitten, and running on pure willpower, Marcus stumbled into the ranger station. The rangers couldn't believe it. A man had walked 50 miles through the most dangerous mountain terrain in North America, with a broken leg, in the middle of the worst storm in 20 years. The story went viral. News crews called him a miracle. Survival experts called him lucky. His family called him crazy. But Marcus knew the truth. He wasn't lucky. He wasn't a miracle. He was just a guy who refused to quit when it mattered most. The doctors said he should have died on the first night. The cold should have killed him. The injury should have stopped him. The exhaustion should have broken him. But Marcus proved something incredible. Sometimes, the only thing standing between you and the impossible is your willingness to keep going when everyone else would stop. But wait, that's not even the crazy part, because what happened next changed everything. Marcus thought he knew about himself. 3 weeks later, still recovering from frostbite and a shattered leg, Marcus got a call. The FBI. Turns out, the abandoned cabin he'd found wasn't abandoned, it was a safe house. And the supplies that saved his life, they belonged to a federal witness who'd disappeared 6 months earlier. Detective Sarah Morrison was the agent assigned to Marcus's case. She explained that the witness, a former accountant named David Park, been testifying against a massive money laundering operation run by the Kozlov crime family. Russian Mafia, the kind of people who made problems disappear. Permanently. Park had been in witness protection, but someone on the inside had leaked his location. He'd grabbed what he could and run to the mountains, thinking he could hide until the FBI could relocate him. But winter had hit early, and he'd been forced to abandon the cabin. The FBI had been searching for him for 6 months. Now Marcus was the only person who could lead them back to that cabin. The only problem: the witness was still alive, still hiding, and still being hunted by the people who wanted him dead. And they'd just figured out that Marcus had been there. The FBI offered him protection, a new identity, a chance to disappear and start over. But Marcus surprised everyone, including himself. He said no. He'd spent his whole life running from challenges. This time he was going to face them head-on. Detective Morrison tried to reason with him. "Marcus, these aren't street thugs. The Kozlov family has been operating for 30 years. They've killed judges, prosecutors, entire families. They don't leave witnesses." But Marcus had made up his mind. "I've already died once in those mountains. I'm not afraid of dying again." The next morning, Marcus woke up to find his apartment ransacked. His car had been bombed. Someone had left a message spray-painted on his wall. "You saw nothing. You know nothing. Forget everything." That's when Marcus realized something terrifying. Surviving the mountain was just the beginning. Now he had to survive something much more dangerous. People who killed for a living. People who never left witnesses. People who'd been hunting their target for 6 months and wouldn't let one pizza delivery guy stand in their way. The chase began at dawn. Marcus had maybe a 4-hour head start before they figured out he'd left town. But where do you run when professional killers are hunting you? Where do you hide when they have resources, contacts, and decades of experience? Marcus did something crazy. He went back to the mountains. Back to the place where he'd almost died. Because if there's one thing Marcus had learned about himself, it's that he was harder to kill than anyone expected. For 2 weeks, Marcus played the most deadly game of cat and mouse ever played on American soil. He used every survival trick he'd learned during his 6-day ordeal. He knew these mountains now. Every cave, every trail, every place where a man could disappear. But his hunters were professionals. Viktor Kozlov had sent his best men. They had helicopters, thermal imaging, and a network of informants. They were closing in, and Marcus was running out of places to hide. That's when Detective Morrison found him. She'd been tracking both Marcus and the killers, trying to keep him alive long enough to testify. But she brought bad news. The FBI had found David Park. He was dead, killed 3 days ago in a cabin 20 miles north. The killers had been torturing him for information about what he'd told Marcus. "They think you know everything," Morrison explained. "They think Park passed on all his evidence to you. As long as you're alive, they'll keep hunting you." That's when Marcus made a decision that would either save his life or end it. He decided to stop running and start hunting. Marcus had spent his whole life being the victim, the guy who got picked on, the one who never fought back. But something had changed during those 6 days in the mountains. He discovered he was capable of things he never imagined, including things that scared him. The plan was insane. Marcus would use himself as bait, drawing the killers into the mountains where he had the advantage. Morrison would coordinate with a FBI tactical team, but they'd have to stay far enough away to avoid detection. If something went wrong, Marcus would be on his own. The final confrontation happened where it all began. The crash site, the place where Marcus had almost died and decided to live instead. 3 professional killers against 1 pizza delivery guy who'd refused to quit when quitting was the smart thing to do. Alexei Volkov was the leader, 6'4", built like a tank, and responsible for at least 20 confirmed kills. His partners, Dmitry and Yuri, were specialists in making people disappear. They'd been hunting witnesses for the Kozlov family for over a decade. The fight lasted 17 minutes. Marcus had no weapons except his knowledge of the terrain and his refusal to give up. He used the mountains themselves as weapons, triggered a small avalanche that separated the killers, led them across unstable ice that cracked under their weight, used the wind and snow to mask his movements. When it was over, Marcus was standing. His hunters weren't. The FBI found him 3 hours later, sitting by the wreckage of his old Honda, waiting for them. But the real victory wasn't defeating the killers. It was what Marcus discovered about himself in the process. He learned that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a mountain blizzard or professional killers. It's the moment you decide you're not worth fighting for. The witness was rescued. Well, his evidence was, Park had hidden an encrypted drive in the cabin, containing enough financial records to bring down the entire Kozlov operation. Marcus became the most unlikely hero in FBI history. But the real story isn't about the criminals or the conspiracy, or the dramatic finale that's about a guy who discovered that the most powerful weapon you have isn't in your hands, it's in your head. It's the decision to keep going when going seems impossible. It's the choice to fight when fighting seems futile. Marcus proved that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they stop accepting ordinary limitations. He showed that the difference between surviving and thriving isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's It's about being the one who keeps going when everyone else stops. Today, Marcus runs a survival training company called Against All Odds. He teaches people that the most dangerous thing in any emergency isn't the cold, or the injuries, or the impossible odds. It's the voice in your head that says give up. But he also teaches something else. Something he learned in those mountains, and in that deadly game of survival. Your body can do incredible things when your mind refuses to quit. And sometimes, the person who wins isn't the one with the best weapons or the most training. It's the one who's willing to keep fighting when fighting seems pointless. Detective Morrison still keeps in touch with Marcus. She says he's the only civilian she's ever met who chose to run toward danger instead of away from it. Most people try to get as far away from their problems as possible, she says. Marcus runs straight at them. What would you do if everything went wrong? When the odds were stacked against you, when everyone said it was hopeless, when your own body was telling you to give up? Would you find that inner strength, or would you let the mountain win? Marcus's story proves that the most powerful weapon you have isn't in your hands. It's in your head. It's the decision to keep going when going seems impossible. It's the choice to fight when fighting seems futile. But this is just the beginning. Because what Marcus discovered about human potential in those mountains changed everything we thought we knew about what's possible when someone refuses to surrender. The pizza company Marcus used to work for, they offered him a job as their head of security. He turned it down. But he did keep one thing from his delivery days. The insulated bag that saved his life that first night. It hangs in his office now, with a simple plaque. Sometimes the tools for survival are already in your hands. Marcus Chen went from being a college dropout who couldn't finish a pizza delivery to becoming the man who took down one of the most dangerous crime families in America. All because he learned one simple truth. The only time you truly fail is when you stop trying. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see what happens when someone pushes the limits of what's possible. Because Marcus's mountain survival was just a warm-up for what came next. And trust me, you won't believe what the human spirit can accomplish when it refuses to surrender. The full story of how Marcus built his survival empire from nothing, and the incredible challenges he faces, next, will blow your mind.